So, so let's start then. Okay. Okay. So, good afternoon and welcome to the second of a series of technical sessions aligned with the strategic plan we crafted together last November during the VHL network meeting held in São Paulo. This plan aims to strengthen the MedCarib network and cooperatively build the Caribbean VHL. Hope this session will be valuable, and please feel free to ask questions and share your insights. Today, we will have the opening remarks by Victoria Cruickshank-Taylor, the Regional Coordinator of MedCarib Network, and we will have in this session and in context of the good practice in editorial process for scientific journals indexed in LILACS, Dr. Ana Heredia from Heredia and Vigiani Consulting will give a talk on diversity, equity, and inclusion principles in journal editorial process. And then we will open for questions and comments. And you also can use the chat if you prefer. Okay? So let's start. Victoria, would you like to say some words?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I mean, this is such a pleasure to have all of you here so that we can continue these sessions. We have been in consultation quite a while with BIREME, and I just want to thank Dr. Anna so much for giving of her time so that we can have her knowledge and the experience so that we can be better and more proficient as we enter our data into FI admin using BIREME's processes. So I just want to thank you, and I know we will have a very informative session, and I want you to take as much opportunity to ask questions and to participate as much as possible. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. So now Dr. Ana Heredia will share her talk with us. Dr. Ana Heredia is biologist by training, master in neurosciences, and PhD in sciences, with a professional career as a researcher for 15 years, research advisor and head of Brazilian Journals operation at Elsevier for 10 years, and regional engagement director at Orchid for 5 years. Currently, she is senior consultant at Heredia and Vigiani Consulting and Maverick Publishing Specialists. So some contributions to the community. We can say chair of Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the European Association of Scientific Editors, chair of Global Perspectives Task Force, the Society of Scholarship Publishing, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Task Force of the Brazilian Association of Scientific Editors, and board member of the Latin American Association of Science Editors. Thank you for coming, and please, Dr. Ana Heredia.
Thank you, Márcia. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. I am based in Brazil. I am Argentinian and Brazilian, so English is not my first language. So let's see how it goes, and please feel free to ask me questions after the presentation. So I hope it will be useful and you will enjoy. So my idea today was to bring you an overview of what is going on in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion in scholarly publishing, and how at the end how we can incorporate little by little these principles into our daily life in the journal, but also in the policies of the journals. So to start with, this is a quote of a recent paper that has been published acknowledging for the systemic underrepresentation of women as author, referees, and editors of scientific journals. This underrepresentation is consistent, is persistent, and well documented in various fields of research. This is, for me, it's kind of the top of the iceberg, is what we see. We are, this is not a recent problem. Inequities in science and in the scientific career and in the scientific journals is not a new a recent issue. But what is new is that we are finally acknowledging and writing and documenting and having data that supports these observations. So just to continue a little bit with this overview of this gap, we have the Global Gender Gap Index that was created in 2006 to measure the gender gap in terms of economic participation and opportunity, in terms of education, in terms of political participation, and in terms of health and survival. So you can see on the right a map where you can see a gradient of this gender gap in the world. And this gender gap not only shows these asymmetries that you can see in the screen, but also there is an indicator of the representation of women at senior levels in science, technology, engineering, and medicine, which we normally call STEM, versus other professional activities. So clearly, women are less present at senior levels in science than in other professional activities. So this gap is even bigger in the hard science, let's say like this. So what you see here is a graph that was published by Elsevier. It's a report they published this year on progress towards gender equity in research and innovation. And here we can see the proportion of women researchers by country or region, and the growth of their participation between 2018 and 2022. So you can see, if you can see my mouse moving, you can see that Portugal, Argentina, Brazil are the three first countries where the proportion of women researchers are higher. In this part of the graph, you can see the parity zone. Okay, everything that goes from here to here is on the parity zone. And in Latin America, the only countries that appear in this ranking are Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico. Here you can see the world. Okay, so the world, we had 41% of women that are researchers. In Argentina, we have 52% of women that are researchers. In Brazil, we have 49%, and so on. And here you have the European Union, a little bit better than the world. And what is highlighted in this study is that among the selected countries, a pattern emerged from countries with Hispanic and Latin backgrounds, taking all the top positions in terms of women's representations in academic research. In contrast, women make up less than a quarter of active researchers in Japan, in Egypt, and in India. Okay. So nevertheless, all the countries are making improvements in the last years in terms of parity. In this graph, you can see the same idea, but for authorship shares for women. And then you can see that clearly the parity is less than the proportion of women researchers, right? We have less countries that are in this parity zone. In fact, we have Argentina with 46% of women authorship shares. Then we have Brazil, and here the world, Mexico here with 34%, and in the European Union even lower than Mexico. So here the conclusions is the authorship shares for women also vary across countries as shown in the figures, but the gap between participation, so the proportion of women scientists, the women researchers, and the authorships remains unbridged across all of the analyzed countries. So this is still a gap that we have to fill, right? Just very quickly, a reminder about the difference between sex and gender in research, because still we see a lot of confusion among these two terms. So just remembering that sex is a biological feature, which is shown through the chromosomes, the reproductive organs, and the genitalia and the hormones, while the gender is a cultural construct and is culturally defined and accounts for roles and responsibilities, for the attributes that are linked to woman or to man, and the entitlements as well. So this was just a base to say that we are still very, very attached to the gender when we talk about diversity or about groups of discrimination. We are still very attached to the gender and the ethnicity and the racial aspects of it. But what I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides is that several organizations that are working in the scholarly publishing field are thinking a little bit broader than this. And then, for example, here, C4DISC, which is the Coalition for Diversity and Inclusion in Scholarly Communications, which is a non-for-profit organization that is kind of leading this neutral movement for more equity, inclusion, diversity, and accessibility in the scholarly communications. They developed a declaration of principles that have now been signed by more than 120 organizations. And as you can see at the right side of the screen, the identity groups that they consider that can be discriminatory groups. And they include ability or disability condition, the age, the appearance, the citizenship status, the ethnicity, the family and other caring responsibilities, the gender and gender identity, the genetic information, geographic location, military or veteran status, nationality or national origin or tribal membership, political beliefs, pregnancy or parental status, professional career or educational level, race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic background or social class. So expanding, right, this panorama of all these groups that could be underrepresented. Here, another example, which is the Committee on Publication Ethics, COPE, that also made a list of their categories of discrimination. And besides all the others that we mentioned before, we have, for example, the decolonized people or vulnerable populations. So decolonized people typically refers to indigenous people and other original citizens of countries which were colonized during exploration and settlement by European countries. And vulnerable populations are those particularly concerned when they are subjects of research, right? And these vulnerabilities can be can be transitory or more permanent. So this is just to show you what people are doing and thinking about the diversity, equity, and inclusion beyond gender, race, and ethnicity. Another thing that is being looked very careful is how to collect data from your community. So how sensitive it is to ask certain questions. And for example, the Royal Society of Chemistry developed a guide on how to collect self-report data on gender and race and ethnicity. So for example, on the right, you have, in terms of gender, now we see this more and more often, that we have the choice between woman, man, non-binary, self-describe, or prefer not to disclose. Here they propose as well to the question, what are your ethnic origins or ancestry? So you have a list of possibilities. And also another question addressed in a different way is, how would you identify yourself in terms of race, right? Which is different from what are your ethnic origins or ancestry. So this is just to show you people are really taking care on how to address these issues and how to collect data to be able to set goals and track progress on that. Sorry. So another aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion is the language, right? So another group of bibliography is being produced on how to tackle the how can I say this, the prevalent presence of English in scholarly communication. So here we have this article from COPE. So can we make English language publishing more accessible? Or prestigious journals make it hard for scientists who doesn't speak English to get published, and we all lose out. English dominates scientific research. Here's how we can fix it and why it matters. Also, two other articles, there are many, okay, addressing how to end the hegemony. This was the word that I was looking for before. The hegemony of English in scientific research. Another study on transnational linguistic capital, explaining English proficiency in 27 European countries. And then a very interesting article that I really invite you to read. Was published in 2023. Yeah, 2023 on PLOS Biology, and it's called "The Manifold Costs of Being a Non-Native English Speaker in Science." So they estimated the cost for non-English speaking researchers to participate in a conference, to make a presentation at the same conference, to review a paper, to deal with the paper rejection, or the proportional, or the probability of being rejected, right? The time spent on writing, the time spent on reading, and clearly there is a cost in terms of time, in terms of energy, for people who are not native English speakers to participate in all the stages and all the instances of the scientific career. Here, a very nice article about an experience, a Chilean medical journal that made an experiment, or a pilot, to be more precise. So they took a 2 years intervention to improve its quality by revising peer review, editing, translation, and publication technologies to ensure full bilingualism from submission to online publications. So the results of these experiments shows that full bilingualism of articles submitted in Spanish and simultaneous publication of both language versions without compromising the financial sustainability of the journal. So I'm not saying this is like will work for everybody, but it's just to put a little bit of a critical view on the hegemony of English and how this can be exclusive and not diverse at all. Okay. Just a little step back on the dimensions or where all the places where diversity or the non-diversity can appear in research. So first of all, we have to talk about the research organizations. Then we have the scientific journals, which is the theme of our meeting today. And then, of course, we can consider it at all stages of research. So in research organizations, typically this lack of diversity or these inequalities have an impact on academic careers, in obtaining grants, in obtaining positions of professors, the hierarchy, in the management of research groups. So how many women or how many diverse people are in these positions or among project evaluators, right? In the case of journals, right, how is the equity or the diversity in amongst the editors, the editorial committees, and the editorial teams or the editorial production teams, amongst the reviewers and authors, right? Do we know that, right, about the journals where we are working? And then when we think about all stages of research, of course, there are some guidelines now. Probably you've heard about the SAGER guidelines, which tackle the issues uh, of uh, non disclaiming, for example, the sex of the cells that we use in experiments, for example, right? So this goes from the study designs to the data collection, the data analysis, and of course the dissemination of results when we publish a paper. So the aspect of diversity have to be present in all of these instances, in all of these dimensions of the research. So talking more specifically about scientific journals, right? Here there are some data about the composition of the teams of the big publishers. The large academic publishing teams are mostly formed by white people, and here if you see white people and the majority of the senior positions tend to be occupied by men more than by women. And here in the middle you have the gender diversity distribution of the editors, of Elsevier editors, and then you have here the majority are men, 57%, and 43% are women. And when you look at the neuroscience portfolio editors, then you have significantly more men than women that are editors of these journals. So and we are going to see this a little bit further. Some areas are more, or some areas of research are more diverse than others. Here, C4DISC, the organization I just mentioned to you, carried out in 2018 and 2023 surveys on the workplace equity in scholarly communications. So they sent out questions to people working on scholarly communications, and basically the results are that between 2018 and 2023, we have now more awareness, we have more initiatives being done in terms of equity in the workplace, but what is interesting to note is that as it's very small, but luckily you have the presentation and you can zoom. Maybe I can. No, I can't. Here you can see that the respondents from historically marginalized groups tended to experience less positive workplace culture compared to the average across respondents. So there were two questions that were asked to them in terms of how they feel in their workplace and if they see improvements since 2018. And in the general response is that there are improvements, but these improvements are not perceived the same way if you belong to an underrepresented group or if you belong to the mainstream group, if we will. So basically, this means that there is a lot being said and a lot of initiatives, but not a lot being felt or being done, maybe to solve these issues. Here, it's an article that you can see in the right side was published in Nature Human Behavior, and then on the left you have a note on that article. This was a large study that has been made on the gender gap on editors amongst publishers, big publishers. So they compiled data from 81,000 publishers, more than 1,000 journals in 15 disciplines, and comparing data from the last 50 years. The idea was to access or to try to understand the gender inequality and the self-publication behaviors amongst academic editors. So the results are very clear. You can see on the left, the percentage of women scientists is around 25-30%. Then you have less than 15% of editors, of journal editors, that are women, and even less than 10% there are editor-in-chief. And if you see these trends along the decades, so the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and now 2010, you can see that the proportion of women researchers or scientists has increased very softly, let's say like this, right? While the proportion of editors and editors-in-chief has been very with ups and downs along the decades, and with a not very clear improvement, right, until now. And here, what I was mentioning to you, the difference between the areas. Here you can see the proportion or the percentage of female editors, and here the percentage of female scientists, okay? And of course, this line in the middle is the parity, and you can see the decades, so the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2010. So the evolution of this proportion of women editors, sorry, here should be editors, I put publishers, is a mistake. So you can see, for example, in physics, right, the proportion of female editors is really lower than the proportion of female scientists, and it hasn't changed over the years. In philosophy, you see a more fair distribution. The same in psychology, for example, and then you can see material science, geology, and physics and mathematics, computer science, all is very not evolving at all. Another issue that is faced where we can see also inequalities is the authorship disputes. This is an article that shows it's called The Gendered Nature of Authorship, and it studies the number of the probability of encountering disputes, to be more precise. Here you see disputes in terms of naming who is going to be on the paper. the ordering of the names on the paper, and the presence or not in the acknowledgements. Here you have the areas, so mathematical science, social science, natural science, and engineering. And then just to show, without getting into the details of it, because of course there are asymmetries, there are inequalities. This is why the papers are being written. I just wanted to give you an overview of what people are thinking and doing and studying in terms of gender equality in publications. Another issue is the objectivity in peer review. There are many papers now on the lack of objectivity or the bias in peer review. And this is a paper called Threats to Objectivity in Peer Review, the Case of Gender. And one of the conclusions of this paper is that women publish less and win fewer prestigious awards than men. Robust experimental and field research shows that gender stereotypes operate in review processes in masculinized fields such as science. Another paper on the gender bias in scholarly peer review. Women review and author even less articles than expected from their numeric underrepresentation. So same thing. Another article on Nature about unequal opportunities for women reviewers, showing that despite this is a study made only within the American Geophysical Union journals, and the conclusion is that despite journals of the American Geophysical Union accepting women's papers at a higher rate than they do men's across all age groups, which is shown here in this graph, both female and male authors and editors suggest and invite fewer women or of every age to referee than the ones that are available. Okay. Also, women also say no more frequently than men in the same age group when asked by the AGU to do peer review. Okay. So even in journals where that accept more papers from women than men, still less women are invited to review papers to these journals in these journals. So this is some conclusions that the Committee on Publications Ethics draw from a discussion on diversity and inclusion. So, and I think they are very interesting and quite complete. So, first of all, discriminatory practices in the design or conduct of research may result in unethical treatment of certain individuals in research involving human subjects or participants. Representation of men and women in academic staff is not balanced, and there are gaps in the equitable representation of non-white people, people with disabilities, and people with different gender identities. Research on the composition of editorial boards suggests bias against women and geographical factors favoring authors from North America and Europe. Unwarranted bias and prejudice in peer review or editorial decision-making do not represent rigorous best practice in the pursuit of knowledge. Shared characteristics between author and reviewer impact on peer review and publication outcomes. The English language requirements of indexing databases can catalyze and maintain biased, discriminatory, and disproportionate publication behavior globally. Commitment to the ethical principle of diversity, equity, and inclusion must include the development and implementation of the DIA policy. So I'm going to finish the presentation just sharing with you some of the organizations that are, in my view, publishing and producing the most interesting content that can help you editors to progressively embrace these principles. I mentioned many of them, Here you have the Society for Scholarly Publishing. The American Psychological Association also is doing very, very nice guidelines. The American Chemical, the Royal Chemical, the Royal Society of Chemistry, the Publishers Association. This is the Brazilian Association of Scientific Editors, which has a space as well. And here are an action plan proposed by the Publishers Association. So I'm going to summarize some of those at the end. Here we have the C4DISC, some of the toolkits they are producing. So the first one was anti-racism toolkit for allies, anti-racism toolkit for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, anti-racism toolkits for organization, and guidelines on inclusive language and images in scholarly communication. Also, C4DISC is publishing a toolkit specific for journal editors and publishers on building diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in editorial roles and peer review. So they make 5 recommendations. So they make recommendations around actions to develop an inclusive culture and mission in the journal, actions to collect and report demographic data to guide target settings and actions to increase diversity, recommendations on broaden and intentionally recruit to increase participation of marginalized community, to create opportunities to gain experience and increase skills in key areas of expertise, and resource-based actions such as guideline on bias-free language and more equitable peer review models to increase equity in the peer review process. Here is just another example on how to start this journey, how to integrate the DI principles into academic publishing. Here you see you can start at whatever moment of this wheel, but I would say start here on developing guidelines on publishing content on diverse racial and ethnic groups, publishing intentional statements to promote DIA, ensuring fair representation among editorial boards, peer reviewers, and the journal staff, ensure inclusive language in journal publication, collect demographic data about your reviewers, about your authors, about your readers, acknowledge the progress and the missteps, and establish accountability. Here, the Royal Society of Chemistry also developed a guideline of minimum standards for inclusion and diversity in scientific publishing. There are more or less the same as I just mentioned to you, but it's interesting to see how each organization sets different different orders or different ways of saying things, and of course you can choose whatever fits best your organization. So here a little bit of where I would start. I know that our journals here in our region are not exactly the same in the US and Europe. We don't have the same resources. So I would say the first step is to develop an inclusive culture and mission to the journal, inside the journal. Write and publish a statement or adherence to the DEI principles. Can be just a little phrase on your website, at least acknowledging it and showing to the community that you care. Write an editorial on commitment to addressing inequalities in your area. Collect and communicate demographic data. Recruit widely and intentionally for production teams, for editorial boards, for your reviewers. Train and mentor the reviewers on that, for them to be aware and attentive when they do the peer review, and promote equity in peer review. My final thoughts are we have to broaden the concept of diversity in science and scientific publish. It is still too restricted to gender and ethnicity. We lack data on diversity amongst editors, authors, and reviewers here in Latin America. All the data that I showed to you are data that are coming from US and Europe journals, UK, mostly UK journals. Also establish targets to increase diversity in editorial teams amongst authors and reviewers, and value the publication of papers with a gender perspective. You may maybe give them some some highlights in the website of the journal. You can make a collection, for example, of papers which considered the gender perspective. There are many ways of doing that. So thank you so much. Now I'm ready to have your questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very, very interesting. But here we have the majority of women in terms of gender. Look at that.
This is good.
Yeah. Okay, so we are opened, right, for questions and comments. Would you like someone to say something?
Me? Are you asking? Oh, there's a question there.
Yeah.
Ayana.
Yes, Ayana, please.
Maybe you're on mute. Ayana, we cannot hear you. You are on mute. She cannot unmute. Maybe
Yeah.
someone
Yes.
from the organization.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
now it's muted. Right.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Ms. Heredia, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Thank you very much for your presentation. Yes, as Marcia pointed out, the majority of participants here are females or women, not excluding the men who joined us. So thank you very much. But I wanted to make a point, well, actually, an observation that the discrimination really also extends to geographic location. And it totally reinforces the importance of this initiative, this MedCarib initiative, because what I get is that there's a need and a place and a space to have voices from different corners of the globe heard. And yes, while it is, I acknowledge that the voices of women in research, it's almost invisible. It's even more invisible in our region, and our region collectively, men and women, and even more so the women who are researchers. So it just gets smaller and smaller as I put it in context for the Caribbean area. So this kind of opened my eyes. I hope it did for a number of people who witnessed this presentation here today, that there's much to be done, not just in terms of publications, in terms of research, but certainly to bring visibility to the work and publications and research that is being done from our neck of the woods in this part of the Caribbean region. So thank you very much for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayana. Makes complete sense. And yes, indeed, we have to fill the spaces, right? Until we have another question, I am just going to mention I am part of different committees and different boards, and what I miss is to have more accents. I want more people speaking English with accents, meaning that, like we speak, because otherwise, one time I was there and hopefully it resonates to someone, because I was there saying, I said, okay, I'm here, I am representing, other perspectives, but still my accent is the only one here. And sometimes when everybody's speaking English, everyone is from the UK or the US, we feel shy to speak sometimes, and this has to be more and more addressed, right? They have to be aware that for us it's more of an effort to participate and to give our opinion. So I want these international meetings to be more and more diverse. we need to occupy these places. It's about the question. Don't be shy. Here we are amongst us.
I wanted to say that this presentation was totally different from what I expected. It brought a totally new dimension to what we consider when we think about editorial and editing and editorial practices, because I didn't consider this as much as we should, and I think that addressing gender imbalances in publication is really, from what you said, is crucial to fostering, inclusivity, ensuring that you have diverse perspective, not only in academic and professional discourses, but in all life, right? Because when we have disparity, and we know it from the Caribbean, it limits visibility, recognition of what we do. It doesn't drive innovation as much as it should. There is not a really comprehensive understanding. So even when you putting together best practices for countries, you put it based on what you know and not really what is happening in other countries. And I think I want to thank you for this presentation, because it really gave a mind-blowing concept of how we should be operating, even at our own level here at MedCarib, to make sure that we promote equitable opportunities for everyone and create an environment where the work is valued and represented in a fair way. And not only when you go to the big databases like PubMed, and so you see 99% of Europe and everyone else, and you see 1% of yourself. So I want to really thank you for this presentation. It really opened my eyes to what we can do and how we should be doing things. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And just to answer another question, I will share this presentation because I am aware that some of the references, or even some of the graphs, were not in the best resolution or the best way for you to see. So I will share. Thank you so much, Victoria. I really appreciate your comment.
Any more comments or questions? No, I don't think so. Oh, Ayana.
I think you blew them away. And they're just trying to come back to kind of find themselves.
Okay, good.
No, I think there is a lot to do, and a lot of people are doing a lot of things. But I also think that everybody is more or less at the same stage. So if you start going to, for example, the journals that you read internationally, sometimes they just have an acknowledgement of or a disclaimer or something regarding the AI. Some journals are really starting. So I think the most important thing is that not to be overwhelmed. It's just to broaden our perspectives and try to adopt little by little things. Even getting the conscience of who you are recruiting to the journal, for example, when you need a new intern, or or make a call, for example, for people from some country to submit articles, or try to have this view and to incorporate little by little, and to promote it, to make it clear on your website that you are doing that, because this is important for the readers as well, for the potential authors, to know that the journal is thinking through this perspective.
Great. Ayana, would you like to say something? You had your...
Yes, actually, our guest speaker answered the question. I was going to ask for guidelines putting the way forward, and she kind of gave that before the question was asked. So thanks once again.
Okay. So, any more questions? No more questions. So before we finish it, would you all could open the camera so we can take a picture?
Marcy, you love this part, huh?
Yes. Great, great, great. More cameras? No more cameras? Well, at least this once, right? Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I took a picture. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Ana Heredia, we would like to thank you so much for this very insightful talk. And thank you all for the participation. Hope to see you again in the next technical session. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you
Have
for
a
the
wonderful
invitation.
evening or afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Here.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.
Bye.